History is often written by the victors, but in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, history was written by the ash. Imagine, if you will, the morning of August 24th, 79 A.D. The Bay of Naples is a shimmering turquoise mirror. The air is thick with the scent of salt, expensive garum, and the blooming gardens of the Roman elite. You are walking down the Via dell'Abbondanza, the main artery of Pompeii. You see a politician arguing with a merchant. You see a slave carrying amphorae of wine. You see a graffiti artist scrawling a message of love or a crude joke on a fresh white wall. To these people, the giant green peak looming over the city wasn't a threat. It was a blessing. Its fertile soil gave them the grapes for their famous wine. Its height protected them from the winds. But deep beneath the vineyards, a monster was waking up. A plug of solid rock was holding back a pressure so immense it is difficult for the modern mind to comprehend. This is not just a story of a natural disaster. This is a minute-by-minute reconstruction of how a civilization was erased from the map, only to be resurrected as a ghost 1,700 years later. To understand the tragedy, we must first understand the life that was lost. Pompeii was not a backwater town. It was a thriving hub of 15,000 souls. It was a place of radical luxury and shocking inequality. We see this in the House of the Faun, a private residence so large it took up an entire city block. We see it in the Lupanar, where the walls still whisper the secrets of the city's dark desires. The Romans were masters of engineering. They had running water, heated floors, and complex drainage systems. They felt they had conquered nature. But nature had been sending warnings for years. In 62 A.D., a massive earthquake nearly leveled the city. The Pompeians, resilient and stubborn, simply rebuilt. They added more marble, more gold, more frescoes. They misinterpreted the tremors as the growing pains of the earth, not the final gasps of their safety. On this final morning, the sun was bright, the markets were packed, but the animals knew. Records suggest the birds had stopped singing days before. The dogs were restless. The wells, deep in the ground, had mysteriously run dry as the magma rose, sucking the groundwater into the fiery depths. The stage was set, and the actors had no idea the curtain was about to fall forever. At approximately 1 p.m., the plug of rock atop Vesuvius finally shattered. The sound was heard for hundreds of miles, a roar that sounded like the collapse of the sky itself. A column of superheated ash and pumice shot 20 miles into the atmosphere, piercing the stratosphere. The sun vanished. It didn't fade, it was blotted out as if by a giant hand. Within minutes, a strange white rain began to fall. Not water, but lapilli, small, porous, volcanic rocks. They were light, almost like popcorn, but as they piled up, their weight became lethal. Roofs that had stood for decades began to groan and buckle. The air became thick with sulfur, burning the lungs of those who stayed. Here we meet our first witnesses. Pliny the Younger, watching from across the bay in Misenum, described the cloud as looking like a giant Mediterranean pine tree. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, the most famous naturalist of the time, didn't run away. He ran toward the fire. He launched a fleet of galleys on a suicide mission to rescue his friends. It was the first recorded large-scale search and rescue operation in human history. He would not survive the night. By midnight, the initial explosion had lost its upward momentum. The massive column of ash, weighing millions of tons, could no longer be supported by the air. It collapsed. What followed was a pyroclastic flow, a ground-hugging wave of superheated gas and volcanic debris. Imagine a wall of fire and dust moving at 200 miles per hour. It reached temperatures of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, over 500 degrees Celsius. This was the moment of the thermal shock. For those trapped in the city, death was instantaneous. Their brains reached boiling point in a fraction of a second. There was no time for pain, only for a final, instinctive gesture of protection. This is why we see them today in the positions they died. A mother pulling her child close. A man clutching a bag of gold coins he thought he could save. A dog chained to a post, twisting in a desperate attempt to break free. They were not buried alive in the way we often imagine. They were turned into statues by the heat, and then encased in a tomb of falling ash that would harden like concrete. For nearly 2 millennia, Pompeii was a myth, a name on old maps that didn't match the landscape. It wasn't until the 18th century that archaeologists began to peel back the layers. What they found changed our understanding of humanity forever. They found that ash had acted as a perfect preservative. They found loaves of bread still in the oven, with the baker's stamp visible. They found the price of wine scrawled on a tavern wall. But the most haunting discovery was made by Giuseppe Fiorelli in 1863. He realized that the voids in the ash were actually the imprints of decomposed bodies. By pouring plaster into these cavities, he gave the ghosts of Pompeii their shapes back. We are not looking at stone. We are looking at the exact physical space once occupied by a living, breathing human being in their final second of existence. While thousands were fleeing the city, one man was sailing toward the fire. Pliny the Elder was not just a naturalist. He was the admiral of the Roman fleet at Misenum. When he saw the cloud, his scientific curiosity was piqued. But when he received a desperate message from his friend Rectina, whose villa sat at the foot of the volcano, his mission changed from exploration to rescue. Pliny ordered the massive quinquiremes to be launched. As the ships neared the coast, the Roman sailors faced a nightmare. Hot cinders and blackened pumice fell onto the decks. The sea suddenly shallowed as the shoreline rose due to seismic activity, and massive boulders from the mountain crashed into the water. His helmsman shouted to turn back. Pliny's response became legendary. "Fortune favors the brave." He didn't just want to save his friends. He wanted to document the end of the world. But even the bravest heart cannot beat the laws of physics. Pliny would reach the shore, but the air itself was becoming a poison he couldn't escape. Why didn't everyone leave? It's a question that haunts every archaeologist. To understand, we have to look at the psychology of the time. For many, their home was their only identity. To leave meant to become a beggar, a refugee in a world without a safety net. We see evidence of people retreats into the strongest parts of their houses, the inner rooms and basements, not realizing they were building their own stone coffins. Furthermore, the Romans believed in the protection of their household gods, the lairs. We found countless small shrines where families had gathered to pray as the ash fell. They believed that if they showed enough piety, the gods would push the mountain back. Scientifically, they also faced a sunk cost fallacy. The first few hours of the eruption involved light pumice rain. It was annoying, but not immediately fatal. By the time the death cloud, the pyroclastic surge, appeared on the horizon, the streets were already blocked by 6 feet of debris. The exit was gone before they realized they were in a trap. While Pompeii was being buried slowly by fallen ash, its sister city, Herculaneum, faced a different fate. Located even closer to the volcano, it was hit by the first and most violent pyroclastic surges. For centuries, historians thought the citizens of Herculaneum had successfully escaped because so few bodies were found in the streets. The truth was far more gruesome. In the 1980s, archaeologists excavated the arched boat sheds by the ancient shoreline. Inside, they found hundreds of skeletons huddled together. These people had waited for boats that never arrived. The heat was so intense, estimated at over 500 degrees Celsius, that their soft tissue vaporized instantly. This was a cleaner death than in Pompeii, but a more absolute erasure. Today, these boat sheds stand as a silent monument to the moment hope turned into carbon. Pompeii is often called a time capsule, but it is specifically a capsule of Roman scandals and daily grit. Under the ash, we found the Secret Cabinet, a collection of erotic art and statues so explicit that the kings of Italy kept them locked away from the public for centuries. This wasn't just a city of marble statues and stoic philosophers. It was a city of vibrant, sometimes crude, human expression. We found election posters painted on walls, with candidates promising better bread and bigger games. We found IOU notes in the house of a banker, showing that even as the mountain groaned, people were worried about their debts. The ash preserved the things history usually forgets: the price of a cup of wine, the complaints of a tired traveler, and the schoolboy's clumsy alphabet scratched into a pillar. The disaster didn't just preserve buildings, it preserved the noise of Roman life. We are incredibly lucky to have an eyewitness account. Pliny the Younger, who stayed behind while his uncle sailed to his death, wrote 2 letters to the historian Tacitus years later. His description reads like a modern horror script. He describes the sea being sucked back, leaving fish stranded on the sand. He describes the screams of women, the wailing of infants, and the shouting of men. He writes, "Many besought the aid of the gods, but still more imagined there were no gods left, and that the universe was plunged into eternal darkness forevermore." Pliny describes a world where the only light came from the lightning and the ash cloud. His words give us the emotional heartbeat of the catastrophe. He felt the end of the world wasn't just coming, it had arrived. His survival allows us to hear the sound of the panic through the vacuum of 2,000 years. The story of Pompeii didn't end when the ash stopped falling. Almost immediately after the eruption, survivors and looters returned. We see tunnels dug through the ash by treasure hunters of the ancient world. They broke through walls to steal statues and silver, leaving behind their own tools as evidence of their presence. The city was a gold mine covered in gray dust. In the centuries that followed, the location was forgotten, but the ghost city lived on in local legends as La Civita, the city. When the Sarno Canal was dug in the 16th century, workers found walls covered in inscriptions, but the engineer Domenico Fontana, perhaps shocked by the explicit nature of the art, covered them back up. It took another 150 years for the world to be ready to look Pompeii in the face. When the first official excavations began under King Charles III of Naples, it wasn't out of historical interest. It was a hunt for statues to decorate his palace. History was being dug up, but its soul was still hidden. There is a strange phenomenon in Pompeii that archaeologists call the presence of absence. It's the feeling that the people haven't truly left. For decades, tourists and even workers have reported hearing whispers in the ruins or seeing shadows move in the house of the tragic poet. But the real curse of Pompeii isn't supernatural. It's psychological. Every year, the Pompeii Archaeological Park receives hundreds of packages from all over the world. Inside are small pieces of mosaic, chips of marble, or handfuls of volcanic rock. They are sent back by thieves who stole them as souvenirs, only to claim that the artifacts brought them nothing but bad luck, sickness, financial ruin, and grief. It's as if the city, born from a moment of total destruction, refuses to be taken away piece by piece. It demands to remain whole, a silent monument to a day that never ended. But here's the most terrifying truth. The story of Pompeii is not over. We talk about it in the past tense, but Vesuvius is not a dead relic. It is a Plinian volcano, characterized by long periods of silence followed by cataclysmic explosions. The longer it stays quiet, the more pressure builds in the magma chamber deep beneath the Bay of Naples. Today, over 3 million people live in the red zone, the area that would be obliterated in a repeat of the 79 AD eruption. Modern Naples is built directly on the bones of the ancient world. Experts say another massive eruption isn't just possible, it is inevitable. We have satellites, sensors, and emergency plans, but nature has a way of bypassing human hubris. If Vesuvius screams tonight, would we be any more prepared than the Romans were? Or would future archaeologists find our digital devices and fossilized coffee cups, wondering why we stayed so close to the fire? The story of Pompeii is a paradox of immortality. To be preserved, the city had to be destroyed. Today, these ruins vibrate with a strange energy. Every year, hundreds of stolen artifacts are mailed back to the archaeological park from all over the world. These thieves send back pebbles, mosaic tiles, and shards of pottery, claiming they brought a curse of bad luck and tragedy into their lives. It is as if the city, born from a moment of total erasure, refuses to be taken away piece by piece. It demands to remain a whole, silent monument to a day that never ended. But here's the most haunting truth. Pompeii is not the past. It is a warning. Vesuvius is not a relic. It is a ticking time bomb. Today, 3 million people live in its shadow, trusting in modern technology just as blindly as the Romans trusted in their gods. But nature does not care for human progress. When you look at the plaster casts, remember, in their final seconds, they weren't ancient Romans. They were just people. They were us. A mother shielding her child. Friends in a final embrace. A man covering his face from the heat. They remind us that everything we've built, our skyscrapers, our digital empires, our very lives, is balanced on the edge of a knife. Pompeii was preserved not so we could study their death, but so we could appreciate our life. It is the only place on earth where you can look into the eyes of history and see your own reflection staring back. The ash fell once, and it will fall again. The only question is, what will we leave behind for the world to find? This was Legend Map. Thank you for walking through the dust of time with us. Sleep well, as long as the mountain allows.